Now to look at the DFS replication, well, I'm going to minimize my namespace we created a moment ago. I'm going to go to replication, and the first thing I need to do is create a new replication group. So I'm going to right-click replication, and there's an option for this new replication group. It says, what do you want this for? Multi-purpose replication, or do you just want this for data replication? Now notice the only difference in these, I'm on group for data collection right now. If you look at the steps here, notice when I click multi-purpose, it actually expands the steps. So the group for data collection just makes some assumptions about your topology and some of those things. So if you want to see the full configuration possibility, just choose the multi-purpose, and that walks you through all the configuration steps. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to choose next for that. Now it says, what do you want to name the group? Well, I'm going to name this Marketing Data. rtsnetworking.com, that's the domain I'm already in. So just the name of the replication group is the only thing I'm adding here. Now it says add 2 or more servers. Well, I'm going to just do fine now. And I'm going to add RTS Serve 1 and RTS DC 1. So those are both of my servers. And you could add as many servers as you want to participate in this. You could add at one time. The only requirement, the other server, like my RTS Serve 1, it has to have DS replication already installed on it. If not, it's going to reach out to that server to check for DFS replication. If it's not already installed, it's going to give you an error message. So both my servers have that installed, so we should be fine. Now it says, what type of topology do you want? A full mesh. This simply means every server replicates with every other server. If you had 4 servers, like they do in this image here, each of these little like circles would represent a server. Every server directly has a replication link to other servers in a full mesh. No topology, that's not really an option. That means I want to come back and do this later. So you could go through this whole configuration, but if you choose no topology, before anything replicates, you have to come back and define a replication topology. So that really should say, I just want to do it later. Hub and spoke. The reason this is grayed out is because it requires 3 or more servers. You'd have to have one server that really functions as the hub, and then your other 2 servers would be the spokes in that example. With 2 servers, you can't have a hub and spoke with just 2 servers. That would be full mesh. Now, if I added a 3rd server and I wanted this to function like a hub and spoke, you could come back and just change the topology. But for now, we are going to do full mesh. Now it says, how much bandwidth do you want to use? This top option, replicate continuously using specified bandwidth, this is 24 hours a day. So I can say full, that'll use all the bandwidth available to replicate. Or if you wanted this throttled, you could choose some speed. But keep in mind, this is 24 hours a day. Now, what most environments want to do is replicate using less bandwidth, maybe during high peak work hours, replicate using more bandwidth during non-work hours. So I could customize this and say replicate during the specified days and times. You can have this replicate at different bandwidth amounts every 15 minutes. So if I edit my schedule, you'll see right now I could say full replication, 24 hours a day. But maybe between 8 and 9, I don't want any replication because that's a busy time on my network. So no replication between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. From 10 to 4, Monday through Friday, I want 512 kilobits per second. So you carve that out however you want. Now here it's only giving me an hour breakdown, but if you go to details, you can see, I'll just click on Sunday. If I edit that, I could say from 12 a.m. to 12:15 a.m. So you can get as frequent as a 15-minute breakdown of how much bandwidth you're actually using, up through full bandwidth to no replication at all. So that's as narrow as you can get it, 15 minutes. But in our demo environment here, bandwidth is not a concern. So I'm just going to say replicate continuously using full bandwidth. And we're almost done with the configuration in its entirety. So I'll choose next here. Now it says, who is the primary member? I'm going to choose RTS DC1. The primary member is only important if the data already exists on both servers. Now picture this example. Let's say I have 100 gigs of data that's going to replicate between these two servers. Well, what I would do personally, instead of replicating 100 gigs of data across my WAN link, let's say one of these servers is in Canada and one's in India. I don't want to replicate 100 gigs of data across the WAN link. What I would do, if the data already exists on a server in Canada and I want it to be replicated to India, I would get a removable drive, like a USB drive, and I would save that 100 gigs of data to the USB drive. I would encrypt it so it's secure, and we would actually ship that drive to India. Whoever receives the drive in India, they'll connect it to the server, and they'll copy that 100 gigs of data. Now, let's say I send this drive on Thursday, is when I ship this drive to India. It is now the following Thursday. This drive is in India, and the data is copied up to the server. Well, if you have 100 gigs of data, not a lot of that data actually changed from Thursday to Thursday. You're looking at, maybe 1 or 2% most likely changed. So you're looking at minimal replication. But the issue you have, when you do your initial replication, the data now exists on both servers, the one in Canada and the one in India. So the concern, if somebody modified a file that's in India that you copied, after you copied it, somebody made a change to it. Somebody also made a change to that file in Canada. So now when you go to replicate, it says, I need to sync these shares up, but there is a different version of the file on each side. Which one is the authoritative version? Well, whoever you select as the primary member, its copy will be the authoritative copy. Now, that's the term they'll use, authoritative. Simply means it's going to overwrite the other version if there's a conflict. Once your initial replication is done, there is no such thing as a primary member. So think of this as just for conflict resolution for the initial replication if the data already exists. And that's what they tell us here. If the folders to be replicated already exist on multiple servers, folders files in the primary member will be authoritative during initial replication. So as we said, conflict resolution really. Well, I'll click next for that. Now it says, what folder do you want to replicate? Well, I'm just going to click add, and I'm going to create a new folder. Well, actually, I'm going to use this marketing-users folder we created when we were looking at quotas and file screens. So I'm going to use marketing-users. I can set permissions. So if this was a new folder you created, I could go through and modify permissions. Even if it's not a new folder, I could go through and add someone and set the permissions right now if I wanted to. But I'll just say use existing permissions. If we go next, it says, what's the path on the other server that it's going to be replicated to? So keep in mind, I'm on RTS-DC1. On RTS serve 1, I'm going to specify what folder I want it to replicate to. So I'm going to just click enable here, and I'm going to specify the path. Marketing-users. Now, this would get confusing to me, but the folders don't even have to have the same name. Does not matter. You just choose a folder on one, folder on the other. I personally just prefer them to have the same name. And I could even make this read-only if I wanted to. When I click OK, it says, well, what it's trying to say is there is no marketing users folder on RTS Serve 1. So the specified path will be created on the servers. Do you want to continue? Well, I'm going to say yes. And that's going to create that folder remotely on RTS Serve 1. So I'm going to click next. That is a summary of everything I defined. And we'll just click create. Everything was successful. Now, a few things to be aware of here. This says, kind of an ominous message to me. To size the staging folder quota large enough to prevent replication from slowing or stopping, you must take into account the size of the files to be replicated. That sounds incredibly scary. It says, think about the size of the files so replication does not slow or stop, but it gives you no hint as to what the size of the files actually are. Well, we'll see that in the interface. Now this says replication will not begin until the configuration is picked up by members of the replication group, and this takes some amount of time depending on your domain. But I'm going to click OK. We are completely configured. I'm going to open that marketing users folder. So it's on my C drive here. Marketing users. And I'm just going to put a file in it. And I'm going to name this file test1. Now, it will take some time before it replicates, the initial replication. But if I go back to my DFS management here, so this marketing data is the one we just created. Now, to look at some of the settings here, I can see the path, it's enabled. I can see the name of the server, the folder replicated, and I also see this staging quota. Now let's take a look at how the staging quota works conceptually. So right now I have RTS-DC1 and it has this marketing-users. And I have RTS serve 1. It now has the marketing users created as well. So both servers have that folder. The way DFS actually works, and the part you don't see, under this marketing users, now that we've installed DFS, it created a folder named DFSR private. That has a subfolder in it named staging. The other side is set up exactly the same way. So DFSR private with a staging subfolder. The way this actually works when it replicates, let's say you have 2 gigs of data. Maybe it's like on a USB drive or something. You connect it up to the server and you copy your 2 gigs of data into this marketing users folder. What happens, that data goes through this hierarchy to the staging folder. The staging folder is what actually replicates. It gets populated in the staging folder on RTS serve 1, and then from there it goes back up through the DFSR private and populates here. And that's where your users would actually see it. So it appears that the marketing users folder is just replicating. You save a file in it, you see the file on the other side. In reality, it's dumping that into this staging folder and then it's replicating. This staging folder by default has a 4 gig quota. Now, the significance of that, let's say you save not 2 gigs of data, but 20 gigs of data. That message we saw referenced replication slowing. Well, what would happen? You put 20 gigs of data in here. It's going to fill up this staging folder, 4 gigs, and it's going to start replicating that 4 gigs. As this fills up, more of that 20 gigs is going to populate this staging folder, and it's just going to continuously replicate until all 20 gigs have replicated. Everything will work fine. No problems. Where a problem does lie, let's say you have an ISO file. Your ISO file is 5 gigabytes in size, and it's just one 5 gig file. You save it to this location. No problem when you put it in marketing users. But you notice hours, days later, it never shows up on RTS Serve 1 in marketing users. The reason, it physically can't fit because this has a 4 gig quota, and that is a single 5 gig file. So the only way to get this to replicate is to either break up that file. Well, you don't want to do that for an ISO file. So you would really need to increase this quota. Let's say you made this 10 gigs. Well, that takes care of that. You now have a 10 gig quota. But on the other side, it has to match. Because if you just increase the 10 gigs here, your ISO file will go to this staging folder. But now, when it replicates across, if this is still a 4 gig quota, it will not accept it. So this would also have to be increased. Now, there is no reason for them to be a different size. I mean, if you increase this on one server, you should increase it on every server. No reason it would ever be different, but you would have to go to each server to actually make that change. Now your file would replicate. We can actually manage that quota, and we can even see that structure. Back on my DFSR server, you'll see this staging quota says 4 gigs. If I double click that, there is this staging option here. So it's 4,096 megabytes. So it's in megabyte form. So you just increase that to whatever you believe is appropriate, but be sure you do that on both machines. And then your staging quota would be able to hold, ISO files or just larger individual files, maybe virtual hard drives, just one large block. Now, something we can actually see. I'm going to go to run, and in run, I'm going to actually type in a path. C marketing users / DFSR private. This is the staging folder we just talked about. So really, when you save something, now it does not come here in a readable format. It actually gets compressed. I'm using remote differential compression. But this is where it would show up, and then it would replicate. Now, this is a hidden folder. So when I type DFSR privates, a couple other files show up here, or folders rather. But if you go back to marketing users, you don't see that show up. So they're actually hidden files. Well, let's go take a look at the other machine and see if our replication is now working. So I'm going to actually restore this down so we can still see it. Let's try to slide it off to the side here. So that's RTS DC1, test 1. And I'm going to connect to RTS serve 1. And I'm going to restore that down as well. And I'm just going to navigate through the C drive to marketing users. Well, our replication is working because this test 1 we created on RTS DC1, the machine here. Well, now, so this is RTS serve 1. I'm going to copy this file, and I'm going to just paste it. Notice it shows up on the other machine. Well, if I go over here and delete test 1, so this is from RTS DC1. If I delete test 1, you'll notice that deletion occurred here. If I were to rename the file, so I'm just going to rename it to marketing, you'll see that name changed. If I were to open the file and put some text in it, we'll say marketing data replication test, and we'll just save. If I go back to RTS serve 1 and open the file, it already replicated that text that fast. Just for dramatic effect, if we delete all of that and save it, it's probably done. So if we open it now, it is done because now that's blank. Now, even though my virtual machine's here on the same host, this still goes through the full TCP/IP protocol and goes through the network for these machines to talk to each other. So if you were doing this from Canada to India, it would work this fast once you add in the consideration for the delay on the connection itself. So whatever like the latency is on your connection, whatever milliseconds that would be, that time would be the only delay this would actually incur. So when I say it would work this fast, I mean you would have to account for the delay on your connection itself. But still fast enough that normally if you create a file and you have both machines open, you're going to see it pop up in real time on the other side, just at the mercy of your network connection at that level. So fascinating concept. But that is the sole purpose. I'm going to put my RTS DC1 back in full screen. But that is the sole purpose of DFS replication. I have a folder on one server, and I want the contents of that folder to replicate to another server. That would be the full configuration there. Now, one thing I did want to mention, just so you don't click on it and break it or anything, I'm on a domain controller. DFS replication, like we just talked about for marketing data, is actually the replication protocol for Active Directory. So because I'm on a domain controller, there is a domain system volume that shows up here. And this is replicating that sysvol folder we talked about earlier. We do not do anything with that here. We don't modify settings or anything like that. Nothing good will happen. You will just see that if you install DFS replication on your domain controller. You'll see that domain system volume. But we pretend it's not there because we're not doing anything with that. Active Directory will self-manage that. We just create our own replication groups. And in the real world, most likely, you're not going to do this on a domain controller. You're going to do it on your member servers, like your file servers in the domain, most likely. But same configuration regardless. Now, a few other useful tools here. I'm going to go back to my marketing data. There are some troubleshooting tools natively built in. So let's say you created a file and it seems like it's not replicating and you're not sure if this is broken or not. There is an option here to verify topology. If you click that, it actually connects through your entire replication topology and just tells you you are fully connected. Data is able to replicate. So in addition to that verify, you can also go to this create diagnostic report. If I click on that, it'll let me do two things. You can generate a health report and you can also run a propagation test. Now, a health report just lets you know that all the members can communicate with each other. But the propagation test actually creates a file, replicates it, then tracks the progress of it and lets you know how efficiently it actually replicated and verifies that it did replicate. So I'm going to create a propagation test. So I'll click Next, and we're doing this for marketing users. And that's it. Click Create. It says that started and finished. So I'll click Close. Now, if I go back to that same window, create a diagnostic report, there's a propagation report. So this is how you view the results once you're done. So if I select the propagation report and go to Next, marketing users RTS-DC1, this is the report that was just generated. So I'm just going to click Next and create. And now it's going to actually take that data so I can visualize it. It's going to put it in this report. What I can do is expand all of this stuff here. So I can see the test completed. And that's kind of hard to see with those colors. Oh, that's better. But launch from RTS-DC1. I can see I have no incomplete test. I have no errors. Now, if I expand the details here, I can see the reference server. I can see the Active Directory site the server's in. I can see that replication between RTS DC1 and RTS Serve 1 took less than a second. And they'll even give you like a graph of the replication time. So if you were going across a WAN link, this would incur a bit more time based on your latency. But for all the members you have, it'll tell you replication time for every member. Now, I only have one member. But I can see RTS Serve 1 is my other member. I can see that it arrived to that member in less than 1 second. So a very detailed look that actually is. Extremely useful.